Hey everyone, welcome to another G News podcast. Today we are joined by Tangi Utikere, who is Labour's spokesperson for transport, local government and racing. Hey Tangi, welcome to the show.
Hey, good to see you. Great to be with you
Oh,
today.
you're very welcome. Let's start with claims made by National, specifically Simon Watts, the Minister for Local Government, that he made before the 2023 election that Water Done Well, which is National's program for water infrastructure reform, was going to be cheaper than Three Waters. Now, the Post reported the other day that he stopped saying that now. And now he's changed his rhetoric to something along the lines of, well, we've given councils the tools to be sustainable. So he's not saying it's going to be cheaper anymore. And he actually was reportedly, he ran out of the room to get away from the question when it was asked the second time. What do you make of this? Is this like a giant cop out or what?
This is really peculiar. I mean, he went into the election, National went into the election last time saying they were going to do that. And I think what has become really clear is that their figures don't add up. And what figures they do have are really clearly indicating that it's going to cost way more. So, I'm really surprised that he's avoiding questions on this in terms of basically running away from reporters. That was what was reported. But, it's no surprise. I mean, they talked up a big game about wanting to deliver water change, infrastructure change, and for it to be much more cheaper, they said. And I think they are, unfortunately, starting to realise that actually sorting the water infrastructure needs of communities all around New Zealand is not something that you can deliver for the price that they thought they would, or in the way in which they do it. So very disappointing from the
Yeah, it
government.
is. Let's step through some examples of regions that are looking pretty bad, like they're in for some really hefty water infrastructure increases in their bills coming up. For example, Wellington, Christchurch, Hamilton, and those councils that may have to go it alone and have to pay these big steep bills. Can you comment on some actual regions that are looking at like a pretty bad situation right now?
The sad reality is going to be that under the current government's water reform process of local water done badly, as I call it, what we're going to see are households get their water bills and realise, oh my goodness, I was not expecting those huge increases. Now, if we step back and have a look at some of those regions, for example, Hamilton is looking around about an extra $900. If we go to Christchurch, it's an extra $1,700. Selwyn, an extra $1,800. You talked about Wellington. I mean, we're talking about a couple of thousand in Wellington, in some circumstances, even more than $400,000 extra. So these are significant costs that are purely the responsibility of the current national government. I mean, they've said that they were going to make things cheaper. When people get these water bills, they're going to realise that it's far from it. And particularly in small communities as well, where councils may, not have an option to team up with another one. And that means they're going to have to carry that cost fully themselves. So very, very disappointing on that front.
Can you comment on what happened with Standard and Poor's? As I recall, they went round and there were about 18 different councils that had a credit ratings downgrade. And what's the effect of having a downgrade like that on the cost of borrowing for those councils?
Well, it's no different really to folks that get a credit check when they decide that they want to borrow some money or put something on hire purchase or thereabouts. Those checks take place, and if you don't have a really strong, solid financial footing or an ability to pay back the money that you're going to borrow, it makes it much more difficult for you to be able to access that money, or indeed the interest rates that you're going to be charged to borrowing that are going to be higher than it would be perhaps if you were the case of being someone who had more capacity to be able to pay. So in short, it means that this independent assessment of what council's rating is, when they downgrade that, it makes it much more difficult for councils. It sends a really strong signal that there are some questions about the viability of councils and their ability to be able to pay back the money that they borrow. So in some circumstances, it means the interest rates are going to be higher. So the amount of money you borrow, you're going to have to pay more back at the end of the day, or in some circumstances, the amount or maximum amount that you're able to borrow is going to be much more reduced. So these are going to have impacts on councils, and the reason why Standard & Poor's have downgraded those councils is because they've looked at the fact that in many cases they're not going to be able to meet the costs of ageing pipes of water infrastructure, not just this year, next year, but looking with that longer term view. So it's quite a serious, thing for councils to be downgraded.
Yeah, it sure is. Why has Simon Watts designed a system that leaves councils maybe going it alone, that will create more than 40 or around 40 water entities in a country of only 5 million people? And in doing so, he's limited the scale, the efficiency, the borrowing power. And his own advice says that he's going to do this, and it's going to drive up the power bill, the costs for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, he's talked a big game of saying we're going to sort this issue out. But really what he's done is he's allowed councils to, make up their own minds and their decisions around this. And of course, if you are a nearby council and you are thinking about whether you're going to take another council on board and that council might have real pressing infrastructure needs, your own ratepayers, your own ratepayer base perhaps might have a level of discomfort around wanting to take them on. So that's why many councils are going it alone. They're doing it in-house because they think that they can, sort the issue themselves. That naturally creates a couple of problems. One is we start to see orphan councils start to emerge, places like Queenstown Lakes District Council, who no other council nearby might want to, come to the party around that. Or you have councils that are not really looking at that longer term sort of focus on what infrastructure needs are needed for them. So this is very short-sighted on the part of Simon Watts, but also is really him shooting from the hip with his rhetoric around this sort of stuff. I mean, national government, Christopher Luxon, they promised to make things better. They're making things worse.
Sure are. You asked Simon Watts that very question that I just asked you yesterday in the House of Parliament during question time, and he said, the government promised local water done well, and we are delivering it. If Labor wants to stand up here and say they're going to bring back 3 waters, then good luck. See you at the ballot box. So what do you make of that kind of non-answer from Simon Watts?
Well, I think that's very courageous on Simon Watt's part, and it won't end well for him if that's his particular sort of focus. I mean, the reality is households are doing it really tough right now. And if Simon Watts wants to think that he's going to stand by a reform package that's going to make it even more difficult for households when they get their water bills, well, then that's for him. But standing up saying, oh, I'm happy to take any question on, local water done badly any day of the week, and then the very next question I asked him, of course, is when he said to reporters that he was out of time and then left, as you say, was he actually referring to his tenure as local government minister? Because clearly these additional cost pressures that are going to be landed onto households is something significant. And he tried not to answer that. He sort of threw his hands up and looked at the Speaker, and of course the Speaker said, well, it's a legit question, you need to answer it. So on the one hand, he's saying, I'm happy to answer these sorts of questions, but on the other hand, he actually isn't.
No. He's making a lot of threats to cap council rates along with a few others in the National Party these days. And they're throwing that around like, in my view, a bit of an excuse for what I call water done expensively. You call it water done badly. So this is kind of like, to me, the opposite of what Christopher Luxon was saying all the way before the last election. We believe in localism and devolution. He just kept repeating that over and over again. But what we're seeing when he gets into power is more like, we believe in big central and a big stick, and we're going to beat councils over the head. We're going to overreach and we're going to cap their rates. What do you make of all this rates capping, and what are the downstream effects of doing this that might not actually be good for communities?
The government have talked up a big game when it comes to localism. Going into the last election, they talked about it. They fronted up at local government New Zealand conferences and talked about localism. And it's become very clear that their definition and approach of localism is very different to what others would think localism is about. And the whole conversation that's panning out at the moment around rates capping, without any conversation about, what financial tools, what financing opportunities, what levers councils might have, what direct funding councils will receive in order to do the work they do, I think is really quite dangerous territory. I think some councils would actually be quite comfortable to have a rates cap on the proviso that they understood, for example, that they didn't have to meet the costs of their water infrastructure, or that they didn't have to meet, the significant amount or costs of many of their transport projects. But that's not what we're getting from this government. What we're getting is rhetoric to say we're going to cap your rates, and at the same time, we're going to expect you to pay for water infrastructure. And at the same time, we're not going to give you any additional money for public transport. And at the same time, we're expecting you to do X, Y, Z, and then some. So this is something that you can't just say, we're going to cap rates. And of course, everyone loves the sound of that, right? You walk out on the street and you say, would you like your rates capped? Everyone's going to say yes. No one likes high rates, but people like to have good public local services. They like to have good roads, good libraries, swimming, recreation centres, parks, a cemetery, all of this sort of stuff that is an absolute need in our community. So it's again rhetoric that the government are trying to use councils as the term that they've said as a whipping boy from time to time, without actually giving them the responsibility and the levers that they need to function for their communities.
Yeah. It sounds like an old trick, to shift the responsibility over to somebody else when you've actually botched it up in the first place. Now, sunken costs over Nicola Willis's ferry debacle, the Cook Strait ferry cancellation of the IREX project, that now sits at $671 million. And the readers here at G News often are telling me that would be enough to get most people fired. That is so much taxpayers' money down the drain. $671 million. Wow. Can you comment on this situation that we've just recently discovered, and what's your view on it?
This is an absolute disgrace. It really is. I mean, people think $500 million is a lot of money, and it is. This is more than $500 million. We're talking about $671 million as a result of Nicola Willis cancelling the IREX contract. And let's not forget, how did she cancel it with South Korea? By text message. I mean, this is absolutely atrocious. And to hear that figure come out, $671 million is just unbelievable. And of course, the government like to say, oh, well, it's only $144 million for the actual cancellation clause. The full cancellation clause costs are $222 million. I've been down in Picton and had a look at the portside infrastructure that basically has halted as a result of Nicola Willis's text message through to South Korea. This is absolutely appalling. And what we're hearing is no responsibility from the government, no responsibility from Nicola Willis. She says she'd do it again in a heartbeat. I mean, this is just disgraceful. Absolutely terrible behaviour on the part of Nicola Willis and this government.
I couldn't believe it when she said, I have delivered, when she delivered nothing and just sat around for an entire year. While, costs were being accrued, and now we don't even have a rail-enabled ferry anymore. I mean, it's not exactly the superior economic managers, is it?
No, you're right. And, the Utikere had its final sailing recently, as we know. We have no rail enablement until these new ferries arrive. And we hear from Winston Peters that it's going to be by 2029. Well, I wouldn't hold my breath around that. I mean, we now have two ferries that will limp across the Cook Strait, a key piece of infrastructure to Cook Strait. We need to have that resilient. We need to have the Cook Strait ferries operating there. Now, we know that from time to time, one of those two ferries will need to go out for maintenance, for dry docking in Singapore. We also know that if we look at, in recent times, the history of the ferries, there have been a few little issues that have arisen that have taken them out of service. So there is an absolute high probability that there might be an occasion where none of the remaining two ferries are actually operational between now and whenever we get these new ferries. Let's not forget, these new ferries, there's been no contract signed around this. We have no idea how much it's going to cost. We have no idea who's building them. I mean, the firm, Hyundai, Docklands, could be very much, the people that were building the original ferries for 551 million. They may get the contract to build them again. Winston Peters hasn't ruled that out. So this is just sloppy, terrible behaviour on the part of the government, and everywhere I go I hear huge concern about this, and rightly so. People should be angry because this is a huge waste of taxpayers' money for nothing in return.
And they just hide all the costs. Everything's hidden. Nobody knows anything, and time goes on and on and on, and it just doesn't get any better. When it came to $4 billion being appropriated for the procurement of a Crown entity to kind of go out and do the job of getting these new replacement ferries, I was a bit shocked. 4 billion seemed like the figure that the Winston Peters was speculating on a kind of a flimsy line in a Treasury report about how it could possibly, with your finger in the air, get up to there, maybe, sort of a hypothetical really from Treasury. But this was an appropriation of $4 billion, and I understand it's just budget. But why would Winston have to appropriate that much money to replace these ferries?
Well, I think Winston, obviously, and he was the state-owned enterprises minister that originally signed the first IREX ferry deal. So he has been part of a government that has, through Nicola Willis, cancelled that original deal that was going to see ferries come our way next year, of course. And I guess, the amount of money that Winston Peters has appropriated, or sought appropriation, is obviously trying to give a bit of bandwidth around this as well. Every week or every day we're hearing about, well, when is the next sort of ferry announcement going to come? When were these ferries actually cancelled? Well, they weren't December last year. They were the year prior to that. So, this is a huge amount of time. And I think trying to get some flexibility for the Minister for Rail is probably where he's wanting to go, to try and get, flexibility to deliver an outcome. But Nicola Willis has not made this very easy for the government at all.
Oh, man, she sat on her hands for about a year there, eh? So, as a spokesperson for transport, what's happening with budget blowouts on transport projects like Utikere to Levin, and why are there still so many potholes all over New Zealand when Simeon Brown said he was going to fix all that?
Yeah, well, in terms of roads of national party significance, like the O2NL. I support O2NL. It's in my particular area. It's a great connector. The problem, of course, is that they tried to whittle that project down and remove some of the key factors, 3 parts of that project that the community really needed, they wanted. And of course, the community have advocated saying, no, you can't change that project. The NZTA board said, okay, all right, fair enough, we'll put it in. But now suddenly the costs have increased. And so this is just yet another excuse that they're landing on the sort of laps of the community, saying, oh, well, you asked for this and now it's going to cost more. This is just, some might call it fudging the numbers a wee bit in terms of, the amount of money that's set aside for these projects. And of course, if we look further south, the Wood End bypass, that's a road of national party significance, one of not many actually in the South Island. As we know, they don't love the South Island, so I'm surprised that they know where this place is. But anyhow, what they're seeking to do there now is to whack a toll on it. This was not part of the conversation. They weren't saying, oh, well, we're going to toll this when we, roll it out there. And of course, why are they doing that? Well, because they've got a $6 billion hole in their transport budget. So that's the roading side of things. In terms of potholes, Simeon Brown, he pumped in over $1 billion into this pothole patrol, as I call it. He gets in his van and travels around to look at where the potholes are. Well, what we're seeing with the figures, of course, is that many of these potholes are being visited not just once, not twice, not 3 times, but in some circumstances 4 times over. Now, it's one thing to set up a pothole patrol. It's another to actually make sure that you do it once, you do it right. Now, that's what people expect. If they see a pothole and the government has said we're going to fix it, report it, Do it once, do it right. So these are some of the real issues and concerns, of course, that are facing communities, and the frustration. Not only that, the road cone
Oh
hotline.
yeah.
The amount of resource that's being pumped into road cones. We must have safe roads. We need safe environments. I've been talking to people that work alongside the roads, and they say, it's actually not that ideal when you're at a site and you've got vehicles speeding past. It's quite disconcerting. So there are those sorts of things. But again, this is the government basically sucking up a whole pile of money. If they're not wasting $671 million on a ferry that we haven't got yet, then they're pumping it into other areas and trying to blame everyone else for it.
It's pretty ridiculous. So if you could sum up the job done by National so far when it comes to water infrastructure reform, transport, ferries, how would you describe it?
That's a massive fail. It is an absolute massive fail. I mean, people were expecting water issues to be sorted, and now we're finding out that the government won't even put up their hand and say, we guarantee that the price of our water reform is going to mean that Kiwi households are going to have lower bills for water sort of infrastructure than what Labor had proposed. I mean, that is absolutely appalling. So it's a huge fail on the water infrastructure front. They said they'd deliver, and they simply haven't. In terms of roading and ferries, likewise, a huge fail. They've come in, they've dilly-dallied around and basically cancelled ferries without any thought as to what the replacement would be. And of course, the other thing is that in the meantime, many people are, with this lack of certainty, people have lost their jobs. Unemployment is right up there. These are real concerns. So for me, in one word, it is absolute failure. And our community deserves much better from the government. Again, they promised to make things better. They are making things worse.
Thank you very much, Tangi, for your comments to all of us here at G News today. That's really, really informing. And we hope to have you back again with us as we go forward to making this a one-term government so that we can fix up our infrastructure and get our water bills under control.
Absolutely. I look forward, along with everyone else, to this being a one-term government. I also look forward to having some further conversations with you as well. So thanks for having me.
Welcome to G News, the good news.